Welcome back, people. Today, I want to create a little short video about how we can awaken through addiction. And we can use our addictions as a kind of portal into self-realization, as a kind of initiation into a deepened awareness of ourself and our patterns, in particular, our coping mechanisms for dealing with stress. I think for many people, an addiction is a way to cope with stress and pain in their life. It becomes this small world of comfort that we can sort of lose ourselves into in order to deal with the wider world, which has become unbearable. This is why addiction is most common for people who are in genuinely stressful situations, because it's those people who crave and yearn for and are vulnerable towards these sorts of ways of escaping from life. Addiction is a way to just escape from life, escape from the boredom, the stress, and the pain. Now, of course, addiction is an illusion of comfort and an illusion of a solution. And it sort of seduces you in with that initial pleasure phase where it sort of reignites that aliveness that you've been searching for, that you sort of remember perhaps from your childhood, but it's sort of fizzled out and life has become this dull, boring, mundane thing, and there's not really much spice there. But of course, when we're in that sort of that void, that dullness, we're particularly susceptible towards addiction because it provides us that instant euphoria, in particular certain substances, certain activities and stuff, things that really spike your dopamine up, and they give you for a little while that surge of vitality and aliveness and excitement at reality once again. And that slowly pulls you in. And when the addiction obviously has you, you feel dependent on this thing, this activity, this drug, in order to feel alive. And that becomes particularly dangerous because, of course, when you're not indulging in the addiction, everything else is much more blunted than it was before. It's like the sort of addiction gives you that aliveness at the expense of making you far more dull inside, far more void. It's like a bargain, really, with the devil, as they might say. It gives you that sort of a cookie of the euphoria from the addiction. But once you eat the cookie, it poisons your ability to enjoy anything outside of the addiction. And that's the bargain we make ultimately. And after spiraling into addiction, eventually, of course, the illusion of the addiction becomes apparent when it stops making you feel alive. When you have to use more of the drug in order to feel the same effects, to sort of take things more and more extreme in order to feel the same effect, you're in this constant chasing for more, because what you have and what you experience is never enough. But then eventually you even more doesn't satisfy you. And so you're just left in this perpetual voidness, this perpetual emptiness. And that often is the rock bottom that really stirs people to seriously evaluate their addiction and the path that they've been wandering blindly down. And often that point is very painful. It was for me in particular. The point of pain was acknowledging the damage that my drug use was doing to my body, in particular my heart, and the panic attacks, the change to my mind, just how much more chaotic and disinhibited and very foggy my mind was becoming. And then I realized that, the addiction was almost this elongated suicide, or this self-destruction that was stretched out over and over and over. And I realized that the path I was going down was going to lead to an early death. And so when I realized that, it allowed me to reorient my energy and my awareness from the indulgence of the addiction towards actually focusing on healing myself. You see, the addiction, it takes your energy into that false reality of the addiction. Your energy gets caught up in there, caught up in cycles of craving, pursuing the substance or the activity, gratifying oneself. And then once the high fades, you're in that come down phase. And then slowly when you re-energize up, you're thinking more, you're craving, you're desiring that addiction more and more. It takes your energy, all your thoughts and all your desires. They are a certain movement of energy within your experience, right? And the more you think about the addiction, the more you crave that addiction, the more is a reflection of just how much it has sort of taken over you. So healing from addiction is a way of reclaiming your energy, reclaiming your awareness, and reclaiming your ability to sort of control yourself and not be totally taken over by your desires. And of course, like I've made a video on recently, where your attention goes, energy follows, or in other terms, you can understand your attention as a reflection of what you most move energy towards, of course, or what you are so caught up in, what you fixate upon in life. Of course, addiction is a fixation of the mind upon this thing, this loop of behavior. And that takes your energy in terms of, you have to move your body to get the thing, get the drug, and you consume it, and then all the effects that it has, the euphoria, that's a movement of energy. And then of course the come down from the drug is another movement of energy, more into a kind of depletion of your dopamine and your serotonin and the various other neurochemicals that sustain your mood. And if we zoom out into what we really want, into how we really want to move our energy in order to feel healthy and happy and to support our mood, when we zoom out and view the addiction with clear awareness, you will see that it is an energetical trap. It's keeping you stuck in this loop of behavior, of a temporary euphoria, which leads to an even deeper come down, and it's generally taking your general happiness, the general life force in your body, it's slowly shrinking it down over in time. But of course, it's difficult to see this when you're in the pit on the movement of the addiction, because when you're really in it, you can't reason in this sort of way. You're only thinking about that euphoria, that peak, and how amazing that is. So it grips your mind, and it's all you can think about, and it just pulls you in over and over again. It's only when that euphoria starts to fade, or the pain begins to grow, that you start to really assess your life and begin the pursuit of recalibration. And this is why often, you have to go through that cycle of addiction to reach that painful rock bottom moment where you have that confrontation with reality. And then from that confrontation, you recalibrate, you redirect, and then you can start to put your energy more into your own healing, into understanding the roots of your addiction, into the pain that you've been avoiding. Why did you fall into this pattern? And you should ask these sorts of questions, not with the energy of shame or resentment or frustration, but of acceptance and this effort to understand. When you bring acceptance and understanding to yourself, you will always grow. That's the two central pillars of growth, really: acceptance and understanding. And it's a paradox, really. Once we accept ourselves for who we are currently, regardless of how flawed we may be, that's often the moment whereby a psychological shift happens, and then there is this sort of this ease of tension when we don't accept ourselves as we are. That creates a tension in the body, a stiffness, a rigidity, a kind of fear, a kind of chronic stress state. Take, for example, someone who suffers from social anxiety. They don't accept themselves as they are. They fear the rejection of other people. They seek validation from other people. And consequently, they have this sort of robotic stiffness when they're in social situations where they're hyper aware of the things they're saying, things that they're doing. And this hyper awareness actually impairs their ability to really just flow into things. So I want to really cue people's attention to how their emotions are creating either a sort of a stiffness, a contraction in their body, compared to emotions that create a relaxation and openness, a kind of just an ease in the body. Now, obviously, we generally want to have more ease and relaxation in the body and less stiffness, but often we are unconscious of the ways we are making ourselves stiff and fearful. But if we can, through introspection, of course, bring our awareness to where there is a stiffness in the body or a stiffness in the way we are acting and the way we are thinking, that awareness can release it once we understand it. And of course, I've been talking about this development of healing from addiction requires processing a lot of pain, right? Because underlying the cycle is escape is a lot of repressed pain and trauma that we, sort of mask over with, fleeting pleasures and stuff. And when you peel off that mask through introspecting into oneself, you encounter a lot of pain. You have to let yourself feel that pain and to be okay with that pain, which is a very difficult thing to do. But anyone who's ever cried, they notice there's this kind of cathartic pleasure of crying. There's this cathartic release of allowing your body to feel what it needs to feel and to let that energy just flow. Because the alternative is to repress it. And repressing it just creates disease in your body. A lot of diseases are just repressed emotions within your body that you have not allowed to process. Repressed resentment, repressed frustrations, these sorts of feelings of inadequacy. That's this intimate connection between the emotions and the emotional body and the onset of diseases in ourselves. Now, I don't want to make this longer than it needs to be, but I want people to inquire into the ways they try to cope with things, the way they lose themselves into distractions, the way they respond to pain. Do they have a tendency to confront it head on, or do you avert your gaze from it? I want people to look at pain, emotional pain in particular, as a sort of portal for introspection rather than something to avoid. Because avoidance does not treat the root of the problem. Avoidance is a superficial, short-term solution that leads to longer-term problems. We have to really have the courage to look at ourselves in the face, look at what we're avoiding, what we are bypassing. And what you'll find is that when you have the courage to look at it dead on, the trauma is never as big as your mind makes it out to be. Introspection is often not as scary as you assume it to be. Often it can be a very profound experience of bringing life and energy to something that it's craving, it's yearning for attention. But so rarely do we give it attention. But when you do give it attention finally, and it can express itself in your experience, maybe this will bring up memories from your childhood or all sorts of different sort of experiential associations. When you let that sort of experience release itself, the way you release emotions that are stored in the body, it creates this sort of this imagination. Memories will flood in, certain thoughts will flood in, certain associations, and you're acknowledging all of it. And you have to acknowledge it to release it. But some people, they're not grounded. They will see this sort of flood of memories and repressed materials, and they'll become destabilized. It does happen if you're not prepared. But if you can prepare, if you can encounter everything that arises with this sort of an open, accepting awareness, then after processing these emotions, you'll feel much more lighter afterwards. There is this lightness that comes after you deliberately accept everything. Heaviness comes when you're suppressing and you're restricting and you're contracted and stuff. But if we can expand, relax the body, communicate to the body that it is safe, then you will notice this unraveling, this sort of flowering of awareness, where it can look around with this sense of profound, radical okayness. Life is okay. You are okay. And you don't need to fear yourself or have shame for yourself anymore. But yeah, I think that's been interesting, insightful, and enjoy the rest of your day.